This video will cover the 3D on 2D project. Here's one example of a past student work, and I'll show you some more as we continue. We look at the project itself. Here is the criteria. You will create the illusion of space or 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface using straight lines only. So notice as you look at some of the past student examples, only straight lines. Although sometimes you can fool the eye into thinking that seeing curved lines with using straight lines only. The composition will not look like anything in particular. No faces, realistic roads, etc. Now if somebody says that reminds me of whatever, that's okay, but don't set out to make something. Go completely non-representational or abstract. You can only use black or white only. So if this were being printed on white paper, all you get is the white of the paper and the black of the ink. No color, no gray, no gradients. Just keep those criteria in mind and look at some of these. So you see if this were printed, the black fills up a lot of the paper and just leaves little bits of white showing through it. This right here might look like it actually has gray in it, but it does not. It's just an illusion created by lines being continuously drawn, straight lines being continuously drawn in a similar fashion to hatching with a pencil if you were in an art class. Again, straight lines only, even though this kind of feels a little warped here, almost feels curved, but it's made out of straight lines. This also has a little bit of an illusion like it's bending, maybe curved, but trust me, it's made up of only straight lines. Finished size for this document is 10 by 10. Which means you can't print it obviously on 8.5 by 11, so you'll have to step up to 11 by 17 or 12 by 18 paper. All I want you to do to get to the point where you're ready to turn this in is set it up as if you were using 11 by 17 paper. If you actually have to print it, that will be made clear to you in the class. But if it's an online class, for example, you're probably not going to be printing this project. Okay, but you will be graded on setting up the document like you were going to print. And as always, or should always be, there'll be a rubric down here that discusses everything. And notice document setup goes over exactly what I just said. So if you don't do that, you lose points on the grade. Okay, so start by sketching 4 different versions that you could possibly do for this project. So having looked at examples, things that you know from achieving depth, watching the video on different ways of achieving the illusion of 3D on 2D, come up with 4 just quickly sketched designs about 2 by 2 inches. So that will have been assigned as soon as we start this project. You can do that electronically if you want, but it must still be hand-like, meaning no vector graphics. It must feel like it was sketched. The final version of the project will be completed in Adobe Illustrator, and that's what I'm about to go over next to show you how you would actually set that up in Adobe Illustrator. And note that in Adobe Illustrator, because this is supposed to be a design project that started from a sketch, you cannot use any of the automated feature like rotations, reflections, using Command D after moving something. This should be a designed project, not just a happy accident. And it's designed purposefully to imply the 3rd dimension. So in Illustrator, we're going to go to File, New, set the document up so that it is in inches, and then we're going to set the width to 10 and the height to 10. And we're going to, as almost always, set up a 1/8 of an inch bleed, which is 0.125. Again, make sure you're in inches and all that will work out easily for you. And then click on create and you will get your artboard with the 1/8 of an inch bleed around it. Quick reminder, if you ever come into the program and it looks different than mine, just remember, go to Essentials and then go to Reset Essentials, and we should look pretty similar to each other. Now, first in Illustrator, I'm going to go over the pen tool, and then I'll move on and I'll talk about the rectangle tool. But just know that you could complete this assignment 100% using just the pen tool. So if you're nervous about Illustrator, the main thing to take away today is the pen tool. You can always come back and watch this later on and learn more about the rectangle tool. At this point, what you want is Illustrator opened up and your drawing in front of you that you're recreating. It doesn't have to be an exact recreation of it, so don't feel like under pressure that you would have to scan it or photograph it and place it in here. You know, there'll be plenty of time for perfection like that later on. We're going to start with the pen tool, which is located right here, and I'm going to click and hold on it just so you can see what else is housed in that same area. Click, hold, grab the pen tool. When you draw with the pen tool, I highly suggest only having a stroke set at first, no matter what the end outcome you're after. And so click to bring the stroke forward, set its color. Let me just flip-flop these once just to get this to pop open. So bring the stroke forward, set the color to black, bring the fill forward and set its color to none, either by clicking here or clicking there. Now think of the pen tool as connect the dots, and listen up right here. It's click and release. I move the mouse, click and release. Now I have what's known as a stroke in the program created by the pen tool. Now notice that it wants to give me some more, like I could keep going. But for now we're just going to concentrate on straight lines. So what I'm going to do is hit the escape key, and now that's deselected. And if I select away from this pen, one quick way to do that is just grab the selection tool, very top tool up here, and click away from, click on nothing basically, so out here. And you can see we've created this line. I just want to tell you why I emphasize the click and release, because if you click and you drag, you get a whole different kind of line, which is not allowed in this project because it creates a curved line. Okay, so I'm going to click on this one with that selection tool and delete it. Notice I made this one. I wanted it to go from edge to edge, so I went bleed to bleed, as we've learned about. And let's say this isn't quite thick enough for me. So even after I've drawn it, I can change things about it. I can click on it. I can select over here in the properties panel. It'll automatically give you the properties that have to do with open path or a stroke. And you can see one of the options is stroke, so I could uptick that and make that thicker. Not only can you change the stroke thickness, you can also select this and you can go over to the edge and you could change the angle of it. So let's say this was more like the angle that you wanted. Now if you wanted it to go full bleed, now what you'd have to do is a couple different ways you can do it. One, probably the best way to do it would be to click away, deselect it, come back, grab this direct selection tool, come over here, click just on this point and extend it out that way. And notice that at first, feel free to get really sloppy. In fact, it's actually better to go beyond the bleed, especially when you're dealing with strokes, because when you go to clean them up, they may not clean up exactly the way that you think they would. So that is an example of an open path. Let me show you an example of another open path. So I'm just going to click out here, I'm going to click again. Now if I escaped, I'd just have a straight line, but if I follow what this is implying, I can click anywhere to make another shape. Now if I escape, I have actually 3 points that are connected, but it's still an open path. So we've just learned about open paths. Now let's talk about a closed path. And all of the same things that we did, the manipulations we made, will apply to a closed path. The biggest difference on a closed path is that you click as many times as you want, but the key big difference here is that you go back at some point to where you started. And now what that gives you is, this entity. But the best thing about a closed path is that they're very predictable if you fill it. If you change the stroke to a fill, and the best way to do that, especially in this project, is to just have it selected. So if somehow you got rid of the selection on it, just grab this very top tool, click, select, and then just flip-flop the fill and the stroke by clicking on this little flip-flop button, I call it. And there you have it. And that's completely acceptable for this project because it was all created with straight lines, and then you just filled them in. And of course, you could click it, flip-flop the fill and stroke again, change the stroke size just like you did with an open path. Let's imagine that one of the things you had on your drawing was this. So it's a little bit different just making random shapes on here than it is to actually recreate some. So I just drew a marquee around here. I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to pretend that I'm looking at my drawing over here. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to recreate that with the pen tool. So I click the pen tool. Now the more difficult thing you have is this line going through here. So just like you might draw it in real life, you might just draw the front of it first. Kind of messed up there, so I Command Z, go back one step. This time I'll pay attention to the smart guide to make sure that lines up with the bottom. See that? How sometimes you just fool around and that little line, purple in this case, shows up, and then when you go here, you have a perfect rectangle. Now you could just simply come over here, but what just happened? Well, with the pen tool, when something is already active, it tends to want to become a minus tool. So what you can do, a couple different things. You can click away, deselect it, go back to the pen tool, click again, and now you're just going to keep on mimicking the little drawing that you had over there. And then escape to get away from that. Now, look at this. If we get in really close, it doesn't look great, does it? And I mean, graphic designers start noticing things like this. So don't be happy with that. But you're just starting out the project, so be okay with it. In fact, what I recommend you do is do this project in stages. Don't worry about the perfection the first time around. Get a rough drawing on here because the beauty of this program is the layers. You can have as many layers as you want. To create a new one, you just click here. You can lock the existing layers that you have at any time that you want. So what I would probably recommend is that at first you don't go with more than, say, 1 or 2 layers. If you get to the point where, let me unlock this, where things are giving you problems, like because it's clicking on that anchor point, it feels like it wants to delete things that are already there, then don't deal with that issue. Just simply make yourself a new layer by clicking on the plus, locking the other layer so that now you cannot draw on that layer, and now you can go back over here and create what was ever on your drawing to get what it is that you were after. So don't worry if things aren't working exactly the way you wanted them the first time through. If you have something that you meant for this to be black but in the background, just change it to an outline by flip-flopping the fill and the stroke, and then On the next time around, you're going to lock all your layers and then you're going to draw it the way you want. I'm going to show you how to do stuff like that in the next video.